Hey you, welcome to Simply Worldbuilding. This time we're basically just going to be continuing on the details we've been working out. We named a few places and added a few details to Yothermere and also to Phyros? Theros. Oh man, it's always that spelling though.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna finish up on a few little details there, but I think after that we're gonna start moving on to a few other places. You had a few extra details that you wanted to add to Phyros.
So also one thing at this stage I think is a good thing to keep in mind too is once you have, in our case we have two things we've got a little bit more details on other ones. Now that you have those things, try to connect some extra threads or leave extra dangling threads as well going forward so that as you make the other things around them, they feel like they're fitted in.
Yeah, don't develop an entire place and its history and then move on to the next, because places are going to be intertwined and borders may have even changed at some point. So having things that have affected things, these guys went to war with these guys, or there was this sort of strange thing that changed the borders, or just anything like that makes places interact. Add those in kind of as you go and not after, because it'll make it feel a little bit more natural. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I did just off screen just now put down the city names for the little X's that I had marked at the end of the last episode there. And I'll be honest, I did it entirely on vibes. So I did come up with a capital name. I'm not dead set on it, but the logic behind this one was I went to Google Translate and I took a Greek word for it's basket, which I thought is kind of not only for like, you know, the food basket as well, because this is a very, very lush, fertile area, but as well as kind of like the idea that it's a collection of a ton of different people, a ton of different cultures and that kind of thing, all in one area. So I kind of went with that like basket of plenty type idea.
Well, I mean, also that immediately makes me think like that's the tool of trade.
Totally.
Basically,
exactly.
It's like, oh, you take this, I'll take the cash.
So I looked at what the Greek word for basket was, and it's something like, I'm not Greek, so sorry. It was something like kalati.
Okay.
And I changed that ever so slightly to Colossi. So I'm not dead set on that yet, but it's a temporary name that has a little bit of meaning behind it, and we can change that around as we see fit.
Definitely.
But I did also set down the harbor cities there.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you exactly why, but Alabat just seemed like the one that's a little closer to the capital to me.
Yeah.
And Alimbor sounded a little bit further away. That's entirely what I did.
Yeah, it's all vibes, man. Like you
and
said,
then
it's all vibes.
Simvali, I had... It sounds kind of like... You mentioned in the last one that it kind of has... Or at least this is what I gathered from what you were saying, that it kind of has almost like a rich cultural or like festival or like special somehow sounding name. And so I thought that I would put that just beside the capital there, a little bit inland, and where a lot of these rivers begin to meet and connect. And I think that it'll be a really interesting place to have, like, I kind of picture it as being like just a ton of like hanging fruits, Garden of Babylon style, like just super fertile.
Orchard, basically.
Yeah,
like a lot
absolutely.
of orchard level sort of stuff.
And that there would be a lot of like importance around that. And that would kind of almost be like...
Well, it's gonna be providing a lot of the farmland for Colossi.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna be like, it's almost the backdrop city to it. Like, you know, when you venture out a little bit, it's like, okay, well, this is where all the agriculture's actually happening. The trading's happening at the coast. So that would absolutely make sense.
So I pictured them having a little bit of a cultural festival bordering on religious, but not necessarily religious, importance to like these fruits and vegetables and lush gardens and that sort of thing, and they're going to really celebrate that here.
Yeah, the harvest
is an
important thing.
And that, for some reason, just connected with the name to me.
Yeah.
Names are 100% on vibes. That's all I did here. And then I put Geen further up, closer towards the mountains.
Yeah, I'm totally getting that as well.
Shatar over here on the like border region.
Yeah, close to the border with Yothermere, yeah.
Kior over on the far side, kind of right nestled in between the one of the rivers here in the forests. And those are the 7 cities we've got here now.
Yeah, totally.
And these are going to be the ones where the sort of the leaders of the houses are going to hail from and have their sort of like base in.
Yeah, totally.
But there's going to be a ton of just other assorted like villages, smaller towns and stuff like that, just kind of built willy-nilly in there that we'll get to later, because they're not important to be named right at this exact moment.
Yeah, we're just working on it as we go, and so totally makes sense. Yeah,
So
no,
that's
I like
all
the
I've
placement.
changed here in the meantime.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I do like the placement, and yeah, honestly, when it comes down to the exact vibe on the name and the placement, honestly, I think you nailed it 100%.
Right? I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but it felt right, so that's what I did.
No, totally. No, that's so cool. It is kind of just looking at these and looking at the houses, like, yeah, center of agriculture screams out there immediately. Military, probably the border country seems kind of huge, and then
Being up near the mountains, that great place for industry.
yeah, absolutely. So like, there's a few of these that actually definitely scream out to like feel like they should be in charge of a certain thing. Now, like you said, you want them to be a little bit more flexible, so it's going to be you've got to not go too far with that line of thinking. But there is a few that definitely. I feel like Simvali. Sorry, I just couldn't read the writing for a sec, but Simvali, I feel like, is definitely going to be one of the ones that is kind of dead set on what they're into, just because like you said, it's like, whoa, we're the biggest agriculture place in the entire country. Like, what are you going to tell us? We're not in charge of food.
Yeah, exactly.
And like you said, it also has like this level of importance to it, and I feel like self-importance is going to come along with that.
It also feels to me, just again, based on the vibes and the picture that I have in my head already, kind of honestly, a very proud city.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this honestly could even be the oldest city here.
Yeah, fair enough.
But
totally.
not necessarily the capital, but just like the oldest city that was maybe here before it was even a nation or something like that. And so I think that they're kind of giving me a very strong pride vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is very, very cool.
Yeah,
that works out very well. So you did have... So you have those details. Was there sort of other stuff now that we have these two somewhat down? I should come up with a few more names as we go here.
Sure.
I think I'll want to do some more research on those. But on the other sort of surrounding places, was there other details that you sort of had?
Well, one thing that just popped into my head 15 minutes ago was that I do want to name the bay.
Oh, yeah,
and I'll come up with that eventually, but it also got me thinking, what about the islands? I'm kind of interested in having maybe a collection of islands somewhere. And we don't have a ton of, like, we don't have like an archipelago anywhere. Or a big, strong one other than, the guys that's specifically their thing.
Yeah.
I was curious about if we want to do like a, small island nation or collection of islands that belongs to like one nation or something like that.
It would make a lot of sense because we have a little bit of a mountain range here. It's small. Honestly, I think we should make it a tad bigger instead of just a singular line that we have, just to flush it out a little bit more. But it would make the most sense geographically if it extended out this way.
It would, yeah.
Because just the mountains, I think we said in one episode, is what are land masses if not mountains to the sea?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, it would just make more sense geographically if you just followed the mountain line. Exactly. And also, it would be kind of cool to just extend this bay out a little bit more. So we could add those, just do a little sprinkler, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that could be definitely a cool idea. I did have a bit of an idea for specifically this island. It's a small idea, but it was because we were thinking we were going to do sort of a high elf sort of society here, a little bit more fae feeling, and then these ones were going to be a little bit more wood elfy.
Yeah, the down to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're still going to be somewhat connected in a way. And immediately what calls out to me is the fact that this island sits directly in between. And so I was thinking if there could be some other sort of elf civilization that's turned this island into something of its own. That's really the as furthest extent that the idea goes, but I think it would be cool to have like this sort of halfway point be significant in some way to those cultures.
Do you think significantly in like, a cultural or religious kind of way? Or significant in that it's kind of its own distinct thing that maybe has some kind of connection or bridge between the two?
My initial thought was that it was going to be something unique. It kind of called out to me because this is definitely going to be like where the elves are from, like originally, or at least it's going to start in this area, and these ones are going to be the secondary ones. And so I think right here is probably going to be, or it feels like it should be, someplace significant in the transition from one to the other. And since they're sort of isolated on an island, it would be interesting if maybe they were their own thing. Got to stew on it a little bit more, but that was basically what I was thinking on this island. I haven't put a lot of thought into these, and I feel like they should be important.
Yeah, I agree. So when I hear you say that they could be different, it kind of makes me think, what if in the same way that we had talked about the people that live on the back of this sort of like world turtle monstrous moving continent, what if they were also like similar but definitely like almost evolved down a separate line as like other elves have done with a larger collective? They're kind of isolated here, so what if they kind of evolved a little bit differently to be a little bit more islandy, watery,
semi-aquatic?
Yeah.
That's a cool idea. I do like that. Often you see in a lot of fantasy setting, there's elves everywhere. There's elves in there's a type of elf for every type of place in fantasy is kind of the thing. It's like they're almost like the cockroaches of fantasy. It's like, well, they live on every continent and everywhere.
Yeah.
And you can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
No matter what. You're going to find them everywhere.
They will outlive you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you can really make an elf of any type. And yeah, having like a sort of semi-aquatic elf society I think would be super cool. Like I don't think like Fishman or Merman or anything like that, but this weird in-between point where it's like they probably have a decent amount of their society underwater.
I want to make sure that we don't get too close to this people that live on the back of the moving turtle.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because I do think they kind of have that vibe almost being like semi-aquatic as well on the turtle.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I don't want to encroach on that ground too much, but I think that there's plenty of wiggle room to figure something out.
Well, what I'm thinking here is like almost having like some of their like on the turtle, they're on the turtle. They're not, if they got off the turtle, they're swimming for sure. But like it would be sort of cool if maybe some of the society over there was underwater, like buildings, permanent structures. They actually had stay underwater, and so they were a fully semi-aquatic society, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool imagery that comes into my mind with that, actually.
Yeah, totally.
As well. Okay.
So that could be something we could do with here, like sort of like a
mind,
little bit of an Atlantis vibe.
So, yeah, totally. Because like if you think of like elves that live in the jungle, I think that a lot of people kind of jump right to like the fairy lights and bridges strung between trees and stuff.
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
Aesthetic. And I think that if you project that underwater into like some kind of
like a coral
domes,
reef.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have like the same sort of feeling that these lights amidst the trees give you, but just underwater. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, that could be super cool.
We can always come back to that if we don't want to
Yeah, it's just a bit of an idea to start expanding on. I think one thing that we should really establish is what of these islands are in what territory? Like, are these... Immediately what comes to my mind is I think these two would be Ferocian, and then this one would probably be Yothrmir.
Yeah, I think that is how international law would dictate, but I really want some island nations somewhere in there. I do think that it's, like, if these two do not belong to Feroz, I think that they would have had to fight to earn that freedom, because they are blocking the entrance to the bay, and this is a big deal to them. So for them to not have fallen under the control of these lads, I think that there would have had to be either fighting or some kind of like stiff resistance in other kinds of ways. Some fight for independence. Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. Yeah, do we want to make them independent or not? It's okay. I have an idea. Okay. What if they are or have been independent? Okay. And one of them is like independent. Okay. And one of them is kind of like semi-independent? Culturally independent, but like Canada, a little bit. States. The States is fully independent. Canada is still technically underneath the monarchy. I was thinking even more so than that, where they have a very separate identity. Okay. But maybe have like kind of the uneasy tension of being like there is a military presence there, kind of keeping them like, you know, in line. Okay. And it's not maybe necessarily a fight every single day, but there's kind of like an underlying tension, and they're like wanting to be as independent as the other one. Yeah, exactly. Interesting. And I think that the other one maybe has already earned that freedom, or that they both did, and then Feroz came back in and sort of like, you know, put their boot down or whatever, and like wasn't willing to let go of that one the same way that they were with the other, or something like that. There could be something on one that the other doesn't have. That's an interesting idea. Actually, you know what? I was thinking, like, yeah, it's geographically makes more sense to send it out this way, but I feel like there's going to be more sort of intrigue in having some of them sort of in the center here a little bit more, a little bit of an archipelago here. I do want to make sure that there is enough room for our turtle friend to be able to navigate through there. To make his way through. That's super cool. Yeah, absolutely. but I also love the idea of islands being in the middle of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, as big as he's going to be, he's still not going
to... Yeah.
Like, I think maybe he's probably only going to be about this big.
Okay.
Like, but realistically, that's still fucking huge.
Yes.
Like, we were thinking he's approximately 100 kilometers across or something
right,
like that.
Yeah.
But this is also going to be a big map, and so how big he's actually going to be on here, we'll have to figure it out. But I think even if we do throw a handful of islands in there, he'll still be able to fit just fine. But just thinking, the reason I think that, though, is because, like, yes, this geographically makes a little bit more sense, but also these elves being sort of isolated and becoming their own semi-aquatic thing makes less sense if there's this huge archipelago with its own sets of cultures and stuff like that. Unless we wanted to make that archipelago specifically... Actually, that could be interesting, too, if they have this sort of archipelago to, like, medium to shallow water, but the society actually stretches from one island through the water, up over the island again, through the water again. Like, they actually have, like, a really long sort of civilization spanning over these islands and in between. That could also add to the sort of idea of this sort of semi-aquatic thing. So we could do that, but I just fear that if we add a whole bunch of islands here and then throw a whole bunch of extra cultures into them, the semi-aquatic elves would make less sense. You know what I mean? But I do like the idea of having... maybe we could even maybe add a couple more islands into that cluster. Totally. You could do a lot with that, I think, and you could take a certain amount of inspiration from a lot of the lower North America and South, like a lot of the islands that are along that sort of area in the sort of colonial age. You can take a certain amount of inspiration from the trying to get independence and then sort of getting it or not getting it or actually getting it, and those sorts of conflicts and stuff like that.
Islands are frequently a point of contention for, you know, who's who's and all this, and there's even still a lot of, like, modern day examples of that being a current problem. Yeah. Some of them are fresher scars than others. Like, I know that there's still a lot of tension around, like, Cyprus. Yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting point that islands are regularly a contested point for different...
Control.
Nations wanting control of them, being independent and all this sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, this is the thing, is you have plenty of real-life examples on how that works. And so it's easy enough to draw from real life how these sort of political things go down. But anyway, so that's kind of on the bits of islands and stuff like that. You were telling me that you had a few ideas on what to do over here, though.
Well, I want that one to feel very nomadic, and I want it to be sort of a nation that gets along and agrees and has a good relationship together, but that is not necessarily one cohesive government. Yeah. So, if I may. Yeah. Have a handful of cities, and those are kind of the places where, I mean, there's a lot of people that can't necessarily stay fully nomadic. Yeah. If you're too old, if you're too young, or maybe you just do another job that can, you know, take care of those old and young people or whatever.
So there are going to be a handful of permanent places, but they're going to be few in the fact that they were selected for a reason. They have some sort of landmark about them that draws people to them. They have some sort of geographical advantage that means the wildlife doesn't get at them. There's going to be a few of those, so that totally makes sense.
Yeah, but other than that, a significant portion of the population is going to be pretty much fully nomadic and kind of wander around. But then each of those cities may have their own form of government or
set of rules, even.
Exactly. But they nevertheless still get along enough to stay under the same banner and have, you know, enough solidarity to kind of enforce their own borders and keep their way of life.
Yeah, definitely. No, totally makes sense. I'd been thinking over the week on sort of there's still these large creatures. I want to make sure these are still a major part of the world, and so I think coming up with them in these sort of early stages is going to be important. What I was thinking for these ones is, I'm not sure if I want it to be a bison or like a cow, probably a bovine of some kind, some sort of bighorn, but I want a huge one.
You know what my immediate gut reaction was?
What?
Big moose.
Big ass moose.
Big moose.
I was even talking with a guy about that today, just on how big moose are in
They're
real
already
life.
Enormous.
Yeah, totally.
And big moose.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like a 50-foot tall moose. So like 2 times taller than they are regularly.
Yeah, exactly. The only problem I have with that is I wanted to, for this area, to have a big elk. And so I feel like that's too close. And since this place was going to be a lot of open prairie and stuff like that, and we were thinking like bison and a lot of herds and stuff like that.
Bison are cool too. I'm totally happy with it being like a bison or something.
Yeah,
like that.
totally. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be necessarily one of these things. I think maybe, because I want big horns on it. I want this thing to have gigantic, cool fucking horns.
Do you know what kind of horns you're picturing?
Well, I was picturing basically like a big horn, like those huge ones. That's what I pictured immediately. But yeah, I sort of like the idea of basically having those. Now, one thing I did want to kind of establish though is like how. So we were establishing that these creatures sort of are like born of the earth and not of creatures. Yeah. I guess we would have to make sure to make it distinct from any specific flora or fauna that are going to be from there, so that it seems like a magical beast.
Yeah, so, that's true.
So yeah, I guess we will have to maybe get a bit of a sketch going of like a mix between some sort of bison and bighorn and other stuff and stuff like that. A few things that made me think that is a lot of the time when you think of like a herd, or even if it is a domestic herd like a ranch or something like that, a lot of the times there is kind of a main bull that is for breeding but is also for protecting the herd and stuff like that. And so the idea that there is this gigantic fucking creature that kind of acts as a guardian of like a lot of the herds and stuff like that was kind of a cool idea to me, especially because since this area is going to be very, very hostile, and I think we were thinking that it was going to be a lot of like sort of goblinoids, orcs and stuff like that, and stuff that's generally considered to be very invasive. It likes to raid and do those sorts of things, that they're gonna make their way out here one way or another. And so one thing that would kind of be suppressing that as well is the fear of this giant like protector of the herd in a sort of way. And so that's what immediately stuck out in my brain. I'm not sure what we'd call it or exactly what it would look like, but I think it would make sense and be a little bit on theme, if that makes sense.
My immediate thought too was that this thing has no loyalty to people, and we kind of were saying that these things, they're almost like a force of like balance.
I wouldn't even necessarily say balance, but what they sort of like, the reason they sort of show up is the magical energy of the area kind of turns into one of these creatures. And so they do end up sort of keeping the balance in a way, absolutely, because it's just the energy of the area that causes these things to exist. So if it's a whole bunch of herds that live in this area, it's going to be something like that that comes about. And so yeah, it would absolutely keep balance in a way. Now, not all of them are going to be peaceful.
Yeah, no. So my thought was that this thing, like, it has some kind of control already over them, being in that it's an enormous thing that they sort of
have to respect.
Like the creatures look to or respect or whatever, and that it has some kind of effect on these herds when it wants to, or randomly, or people don't know, or whatever, but that can cause massive herds of wildebeests, buffalo, whatever, to basically fly into some kind of rage, which is obviously very dangerous for everything and everyone, and that almost kind of in a way to like lash back at the people who are, you know, also traveling around and killing a bunch of them and eating them and stuff like that. And so that's like a reason why it has earned also the people's respect and fear, but then also kind of like loathing in the fact that like this thing is capable easily of like guiding, you know,
a stampede
so
through your
many
town.
Exactly, it could level your town.
It might be a sort of an interesting thing because yeah, I was thinking like a certain amount of the ecosystem is basically going to be based on this thing's movement. It's going to have, as a herd, it's going to have a bit of a level of like almost gravity to it. It would be kind of cool if there was like this sort of primary herd, and it would be kind of cool if it was like multiple types of animals as well, totally, that sort of 100%. Flock to it, and
a moving ecosystem.
And it's like sort of the main herd, and it's always surrounded by it, but then just kind of as always, like little collections will branch off and stuff like that and go do their own thing, or like there's a cluster of like young ones that again want to like certain herds will split up and intermingle and do stuff like that. And so it would be kind of interesting if just the people who live in this place understand, don't go close to the main herd.
I think that an interesting dynamic too is that, like, especially with whatever this major herd is that is being led or controlled or whatever by this giant beast, is that they know that they can't actually take that on, even with like the combined might of everybody. They couldn't do that.
They couldn't possibly.
And so they, like roam around and kind of keep tabs on it and stuff like that. And if it's heading towards a city or something like that, they look like they're getting steamed up, and they might be working towards a place that's populated. That they put all of their effort into sort of just diverting it. And so that maybe like maybe hundreds of people will die in the effort, but they manage to do some sort of maneuver that kind of just steers them off course back out into the empty expanse. And that's kind of like in between that and like whatever creatures may roam up from that swampy land over there as well. That they kind of like, not only are they looking for food and stuff like that and just sort of existing in the nomadic lifestyle, but also are pretty much constantly patrolling for dangerous threats. Be that creatures coming up from the
swamplands,
the east swamplands there, or these major herds that could actually cause damage to a populated area.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, there's like this kind of main herd, and like most of when you're doing your hunting and stuff like that, you're looking for ones that have sprout off. And so if you see the main one approaching your area, it's probably time for you to pick up and leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're gonna probably consume a vast majority of any of the plant life around. And secondly, like, if you're looking for a food source, that isn't it.
Yeah.
And so, the idea of this giant protector of the herd is funny to me, and I do like that idea. Plus, it is also interesting in the way that, like, the people of that place, their nomadic lifestyle is almost mimicking that of the herd at the same time.
Yeah.
And so there is this sort of built ecosystem and equilibrium in between the people who live there and the animal life as well.
Yeah, and that's, honestly, that is what inspired me to do that, because I find that so interesting and unique and cool.
Yeah.
That I really like the idea that there's sort of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
right?
totally. I mean, frick, in D&D terms, if you're going to make a ranger from anywhere on here, that's going to be the place, because it's just the survival checks and the understanding of the land that rangers are so known for. Like, a lot of them, like, people think of as forest, but that's a little bit of a twist on the idea that it's this open prairie and you get to know that sort of thing. So that's what came to my mind when thinking of this place, just for a creature. And I like the way we've kind of come up with the dynamic for it,
that's
for sure.
That's totally what I would have wanted as well. Like, anytime I think of, some sort of mega beast there, that is exactly what I wanted for that.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. Moving on to here a little bit, I previously mentioned I freaking love elk. Just visually,
absolutely,
the magical
gorgeous.
Elk is just a motif that I really like. I even tried doing a little bit of research on it, and I couldn't find any specific examples. I only dug a little bit, but I know in like games and media and stuff like that, like when it just comes down to like the forest spirit of and it's always represented by an elk in a way. I do like that, and it feels a little bit more down to earth in the way that we're wanting this area to be, rather than like something way more magical, like a freaking unicorn or something that would be in what we're picturing here. Now I'm struggling to think of exactly how big it should be, because if it's going to be a dense forest, you can't be huge.
Yeah.
So it's a question, but my counterpoint to that in my own head was, well, you can also make the trees huge. Like, one thing that could be cool and significant about this forest is you get a little bit of this, what is it, the California redwood that's fucking huge. Like, gigantic trees. And so it could be cool if we had a little bit of that sort of idea, just like the gigantic, like, old growth, huge trees around this area, and that could be something that makes it unique, is the enormity of its forest. And so that's just sort of what popped into my head when trying to think of a gigantic beast that would be roaming a forest. And it's also, I found that in relationship to like the fairy realm, or what you'd call the fae in D&D, deer are often associated with that. And so it just kind of fit for me. And so the idea of some gigantic magical elk stuck out as probably the mainstay sort of keeper for this area.
Yeah, that sounds like a gorgeous visual. Do you have an idea for what sort of like threat that this thing poses, or is it maybe that it's not actually all that significant of a threat and it's become sort of like a...
I think it's going to be one of the instances of the people being in a
like
good
reverence?
relationship.
Yeah.
It's going to be seen as a forest spirit or a god in a way, and revered as something to be protected and stuff like that. So I think it is probably going to be at least our first instance of something that is protected by the people and beloved. The people's relationship with it, we can kind of figure out whether it's sort of more in myth or whether they have a really tight relationship with it, but we can figure that out as it sort of comes to us for sure. That it's just that's all I really thought of, is just like, I love elk. They're like one of my favorite animals, and so I had to put it somewhere basically.
No, of course, it sounds gorgeous. And then also when you said tight relationship, I was like, yo, elk. Dab him up.
It's the freaking deer from Adventure Time. It just takes off the hooves with the gloves and just like, yo, pound it. That's incredible.
But I also thought, like, I don't know exactly how you're picturing it. I'm kind of picturing it as being almost like borderline ethereal, like glowy, or like something even further away from like the natural thing that you may picture it as. And the visual in my head of like, you've got this huge old growth forest, and then you make your way down to the lake. I'm so excited to drink some fresh water. And then on the other opposite side of the riverbank, you see this enormous like sort of spiritual elk drinking from the water, and just like the visual of that is super cool in my head. I like that a lot.
Well, I think the idea of the encounter of it almost being sort of like a unicorn, where like it's a rare sighting. And when you do see it, it's like this absolutely beautiful thing. It would be kind of cool. Like, again, you got to mix it up. You can't just make it elk but big.
Yeah.
But the spots that you get on a baby deer, I think would also be something cool to put on that as well, just because the spots add like this sort of ethereal nature to it. And obviously you got to make the antlers sort of different and cool. But yeah, definitely in the way that like you go down to the lake and it's super quiet and you don't hear anything, and you look up and you see it there, and it's like it's definitely something I think that would be considered a rare, and if you do end up seeing it, like really lucky, or just like a once in a lifetime sort of scenario. And that would actually be a cool contrast as well, because I do like the idea of it being like 30-40 feet tall, like huge, but still weirdly elusive. Hard to find.
Absolutely.
Because that would other than maybe the dragon, because that one's almost hidden specifically in a way, but it's not moving in a way, whereas like almost every other one, it's hard to miss. You know what I mean? It's impossible to miss almost, and they're so significant, whereas with this one, it would be so interesting to have a contrast of one that few people have seen, even though it's gigantic. So I really like that idea for this area as well. The final one I had even thought of was for the swamp area. The one that pops into my brain is a toad.
Yeah, for sure.
Gigantic toad. I think it's obviously just fits the swamp. I was trying to think about it, and a visual that popped into my head, especially with over here, we referred to it I think once as the Grand Bog, and I do like that idea, but the just this gigantic toad that everyone's afraid of, and it's so big, and it's the top of the food chain. But I had a little bit of a visual of just like this sort of bit of an Ichabod Crane, just like really downtrodden dude walking on his horse, trying to get to some sort of civilization, and then just just the toad eating him and the horse whole, because this thing is gigantic, and it's just like sinks back into the and I like that idea. Again, probably not one of the biggest of all of the things, but big enough to eat a horse. And like those sorts of sizes of creatures are basically going to be its food chain. And so that sort of visual stuck out to me there. I think there should be a lot, but I like the idea of there basically being like this king toad ass, like really scary swamp creature that's just on top of the food chain.
So I've got another hypothetical to pitch for you.
All right, shoot.
This is a spooky, dangerous place with few people.
Yes.
So being that there's a very specific vibe of danger, icky, bad, and also few people to combat it, what if there's like a bit of a buildup of like a lot of these things kind of wandering around? And maybe not like thousands, but like quite a lot.
Yeah, you could say hundreds.
Yeah, because there's just like, you know, across most of the other rest of the world here, most corners are pretty populated. But if that's pretty sparse down there, they just sort of start collecting, you know what I mean? And
well, it ends up being a survival of the fittest thing. Like, you're almost, other than like small creatures that can stay out of the way, you're probably gonna find less animals and more of these creatures. That's an interesting idea. Yeah. Well, because I was thinking like the kind of people, quote unquote, that are gonna be down there are gonna be sort of goblins, orcs, hobgoblins, like that sort of thing, but they're already typically known for being this sort of survival of the fittest sort of society, and so it would work super well if they have a handful of tribes, but they try their best, man, to not get gobbled up, and it happens regularly. Like, just peoples are completely wiped out, and some of them crawl their way back up into making a bit of a civilization, but it's all just, try your best not to die. And so, yeah, there's plenty of, like, swampy or icky creatures. Like, you could have, it's like, bam, giant spider. You can think of, we could do another giant snake, but in a little bit of a different way than we were thinking here.
I really love the aesthetic of, like, this has been in a lot of things. Like, swampy things walking on big ol' stilt-like legs. You've probably seen that in quite a few things, but that is just super cool to me, and I don't care if, like, people do that, or if there's some kind of like monster big ol' thing that has like stilt-like creepy spooky legs.
Well, the idea, the stilt spider, that's sketchy as fuck. Yeah, I hate that. Like, it's just like it's already, like, spiders already have long legs, but like, picture like most of the knee joints and stuff are up top, and then it's just got long.
Oh man, have you seen the picture of, like, I think this was supposed to be some sort of like squid type creature, but there's like an underwater like submarine picture.
Oh yeah, oh dude, are you kidding me? I've seen, I think, every picture and video of every disgusting thing that lives under the sea, because I seek that shit out regularly.
So just a long ass appendage like that.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, exactly. But there's this, this sort of spider. Yeah, the stilt spider set. I just love that name because just the alliteration's cool for names. But I think the alliteration adds creepiness to it in a sort of way. And then, we could have the toad. Let's see, what else could be in a swamp that would be sketchy?
Gotta have undead type things.
Oh,
right?
yeah, totally.
Like skin sloughing off. And icky.
It would be cool if that was associated with a specific one. Like, there was one that is undead, and actually, like, undead is like sort of a sickness that actually spreads as this thing walks around. My immediate thought was kind of the stilt spider, but I think...
Well, in my mind, like, one of the first visions I had of it was some sort of like mammalian. But then, like, it's got these long ass creepy icky, that's not a mammal type stilt legs, and like it's just got like its hide is like kind of like it's melting off of it and stuff, and like some sort of moose, horse, like large beast with nasty, freaky legs and melty skin. Almost
the exact opposite of what you would find there. Like this sort of, beautiful, reverent creature. It's like, no, opposite of that. We could even do a moose. One visual that actually kind of stuck out to me that I was kind of initially starting to like shoehorn into the stilt spider. The undead are often associated, or at least visually, with like lanterns.
Yeah.
And so the idea of like it, at the very least, if it isn't an actual technical lantern, but some sort of like flickering lantern light, or like you can see like wisps. The idea of like either this thing sort of glowing in that way, or having things hang off of it that glow that way. And the moose kind of stuck out for me because you can have that hanging off the antlers.
Yeah. Or one other thing too is like if we kind of throw it back to the idea of like a stilt spider. What if this thing is very, very large? It has very like thin legs that almost kind of like, if you're not really looking, blend in with like dead tree limbs and stuff like that. And if it's dark and spooky and you can't see all that well, then what is, the shape of a large creature above you gonna stand out against like a dark sky full of clouds.
You actually walk underneath it and don't even know.
And maybe it has some sort of thing that is like a lantern that like, oh no, I'm lost in the swamp. Oh, but there's light over there. Is that a campfire or something like that? And you walk in and like now you're underneath this thing or something like that. Almost in the way that like the anglerfish have their little lights to attract prey, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like the idea of having like sort of wispy sort of lanterns like hanging off of it in certain areas. And I don't know how you'd put something below it, but I mean, maybe even that's just a magical thing. Like it just like with its breath or something like that, or it shits out little wispy fires. But yeah, it like leaves these sort of little traps that that attract prey to it. And then who knows if it eats you or if it just like casts a curse on you in a way. And then you're undead immediately and you're part of the horde that's kind of following it, or even if not, just hanging around and you're just an undead now. But it's walking around turning these things, and maybe maybe it doesn't eat, but that's how it sort of feeds on the landscape, is slowly converting it into its sort of idea.
Really cool to have like, maybe it's got kind of almost a territory that it's like carved out. Where it's like the king of that area, and so like, in this entire region or something like that is where it could potentially be. And then there's just like this silent, slow moving, shambling army of the undead thing or whatever, and another silently moving but also spookily enormous creature that is kind of creating those things.
Yeah, I love the visual of like you can picture a little bit in like the more wooded areas of in Elden Ring. What's the swampy area?
Liurnia of the Lakes?
Yeah, but in that area that has the undead, you know what I mean? And they like throw those little spooky wispy things at you. Like picture like that sort of area, and you're walking through and you're tired and you're walking through this swamp. And like, there's plenty of like dead trees sticking out of the water and stuff like that, and you're tired, you're not thinking about it, and you walk right through, and like its legs are like super stocky, and if you're not paying attention, look just like the trees and dead foliage around, and you walk right under this thing, and then you just look up and it's right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just such a cool visual,
right?
And I like the idea that it's constantly wandering and constantly doing that, but it having a bit of an area that kind of it's picked, or it just spent most of its time, and now that's the case, is so huge. That was actually a little bit of another thing about this, is I kind of liked the idea of it being kind of sectioned off in a way, and like in certain, like it's all swamp, but there's certain areas that just feel different.
A little different flavor.
They're the territories of these other huge beasts, because like you said, there should be a few, so it would be cool if like there's the Grand Bog with the toad, and then you have the sort of undead lantern moose that has a bit of an area over here, and then maybe there's like a giant there's the stilt spider, or like another sort of giant insect, or like a dragonfly or something like that.
Oh, and the mosquito is here. Ugh,
dude, giant deadly mosquito? Are you fucking kidding me? Oh, fuck
they give you Lyme disease. It's just a bummer, dude.
It's just, like, just imagine just like freaking, you're just a dude and you just get Olaf from Frozen by a mosquito. Just, oh dear, I've been impaled. Like, it's just giant mosquito, like just right through your sternum. You're like, well.
It's not even getting the blood. It's out of my body on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. One more thing I wanted to ask on this place is we have to acknowledge this area as well.
I do have a specific vibe that I want for that, and it is eerily silent and different from the rest. Like I want it to be also like dark and ominous, but not in the like spooky swamp zombies buggy type thing, but I do want it to be like eerily silent and peaceful,
but in a creepy way,
but also I want it to be more or less non-hostile, and I want maybe there to be like significant glowing neon things, because I want it to kind of feel like I want to get like moon vibes. Did you ever play World of Warcraft? You played World of Warcraft. Do you know the like Night Elf vibe?
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of have that vibe where it's like dark, but also like
lots of luminescence.
Yeah, lots of luminescence.
Okay,
yeah, and I want like some references to the moon, space, stars, celestials, that kind of thing. I want that to kind of be the vibe there.
That's like the entire starting zone of the Night Elves.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's kind of what I want the vibe to feel like.
Yeah, fair enough. Immediately what sort of pops into my head when thinking of that is fireflies.
Yeah, totally.
That could be something of a motif that sort of ends up in that area.
Absolutely.
And it could be like almost sort of a curse of silence that's over that place. Maybe the people who actually live there don't talk. And I don't know, that just sort of popped into my head. But yeah, like a lot of bioluminescence and stuff like that. And
I was picturing like on the island there in the middle of this sort of like little bay we've got, to have some kind of like old altar in the middle of this like ring of like stones, not necessarily like Stonehenge, but like some kind of like either moon-shaped or circle-shaped thing that like has some sort of like reference from the sky or the stars and the moon, something like that. Like, oh, if you look through at this angle, like the moon casts its light on the altar, that like that kind of thing. I want it to be very, very moon and night
centric
themed and peaceful, but in like a kind of eerie sort of way.
Yeah. Well, do you like the idea of the people living there being mute?
I honestly originally didn't think of people living there.
Yeah.
I think that it's a cool idea for people to be there and for them to be mute.
Well, I was just picturing specifically, since there's like an altar and a sort of religion to it, like it has to have some sort of people there.
Oh, I was thinking of it being so like ancient that it like there's nobody there now, and it's like a
religion,
like
but long
setting
forgotten.
that is totally forgotten about, and like people may like visit, but they have no idea what it is, and so that kind of adds to the scariness of it. You know what I mean?
Well, we would have to come up with actually. The idea of like a curse of silence is sort of cool to me, because like cool, I feel like there has to be a little something that makes it so nothing else encroaches there. Like there's a reason this place is generally weirdly safe.
In my mind, and we can have a reason for it 100% too, but in my mind that was also sort of why it's so spooky, is that just nothing is there, but why? We don't know why, and that's unsettling, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, though, is we might know why, but
we can
a reader
or
a play.
Yeah.
Well, I do like the idea of like there's like a curse on this place that makes it so that, and you can call it the curse of silence. Now, whether it specifically does that or not is who knows, but nothing around here makes noise, or very, very little. And as you walk into this place, the loudest thing you hear is your own feet in the mud and sloshing through the water. And if there aren't any people here, maybe entering this area makes it so you can't speak. And that would be an interesting thing as a player to deal with.
I had another idea as well.
Okay.
This place, for whatever reason as well, drives people mad. So, like, let's say, picture yourself in... There's places where, like, it's so silent that you can hear like your heart beating and the blood moving inside your body.
Well, there's rooms that people have been put in and stuff like that, and you actually can't be in those rooms for too long, or it actually drives you crazy.
Yeah, and I kind of want that to happen. Like you may be walking around and like hearing your feet slosh or whatever, and then like even that goes quiet, and then like you hear your insides making noise, and you just start losing your mind. And so like, for whatever reason, people do not like to be there because maybe they've heard all these stories, and then if you go there, like, oh yeah, you're freaking out, something's happening to you, kind of thing. I want it to be a little bit vague, a little bit spooky, very unsettling. But then I also do think that island, I want to be more or less fine and safe. But just people don't know what the hell the deal is with that.
It would be cool if that sort of curse got more and more intense the closer you got. And then the moment you stepped on the island, it was fine. Yeah. But I also like the idea that maybe the altar and the island itself is actually what's causing it, or some sort of strange religious mistake that happened at that altar.
Yeah.
Like this place is cursed.
But then that's like the eye of the storm, right? Where
Exactly.
All of a sudden,
That's a fucking cool idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go with that. So yeah, there's no monsters like again, you might see like fireflies and like certain insects and stuff like that, like stuff that's small and unassuming, but you're not going to see anything bigger than your fist in this place. And so I like that idea. And yeah, that would also keep all these other monsters out. No matter how big and scary you are, you walk into that place and just something about it drives you crazy.
Starts breaking, yeah.
Yeah, and so an animal and its animal instinct will just be like,
yeah,
nope, see you later.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Yeah, that's a few really good ideas for the swamp. I love that. But okay, that's perfect. Well, probably about time to
send it to intermission, I guess, and we'll come back and start working on some more stuff.
All right. See you in a sec.
Hey there, welcome to the intermission. As we've mentioned previously, we're going to use this time to go over questions and comments and feedback that you've left in our comments or in our Instagram DMs. And we actually have a few of those to share now. So, number one, our first comment is from MR Lou, who says, "Man, this looks amazing. I'm going to watch this as soon as I can." Super flattering. Thank you very much for that. I hope that as you watch this, you really enjoy what we're doing. And if you've got any more feedback or comments or anything like that as you go, let us know.
Yeah, we appreciate that very much, Lou. Thank you very much. We have another comment from Hayden Roberts 8984, who says, "This makes my nation rise." Thank you very much, Hayden. That wasn't exactly what we were going for, but you know what? Whatever gets you going. Thank you very much.
So, as you go, as you watch this show, feel free to leave comments, feedback, friendly criticisms in the comments section on our YouTube channel here, or you can also follow us on Instagram and Spotify. We will respond and possibly have here any Instagram DMs as well that you send us on there.
Thanks. Welcome back. Well, taking a look at the map here, we have a handful of creatures that are definitely going to be sort of our mainstays for at least one per area, and we might elaborate a little bit more on a few on the swamp because we want a few more there. One thing we did want to touch on is sort of location-wise, maybe where we're going to put a few of the sort of main settlements here. Was there anywhere specific that kind of called out to you?
Well, I think that one thing that is a significant point is that these are people who are not going to have really any significant interest in sea travel or anything like that. And fish, I think, can be like a supplementary diet type of thing, but not something that they're going to be all that focused on. So they're actually going to surprisingly stay away from all the zones that look typically enticing for cities.
Well, I mean, you also got to keep in mind... okay, I'm specifically thinking here and maybe here. They're going to be out of the way of the herds, though, at the same time. So that might be something to consider. But they're also not... they're not going to be a coastal city. They're just far enough away from the prairie. Like, I think that's the advantage.
So a couple of things to keep in mind in that aspect is that I was anticipating them being a little bit out of the way of the actual, like, dangerous...
like the wide open space?
Yeah. But also they want to have some level of access to things like freshwater and smaller herds that are actually beneficial. So having them right very far out on the tip of a peninsula or something like that is not actually very beneficial to them. But also I was thinking that these are going to be areas that have some sort of like cultural or religious significance to them. So I'm trying to think of areas that seem to have all of those key factors and then sort of come up with a reason about why they're significant culturally as well.
I think I do see one of them being like maybe here, not on the peninsula, but in the area kind of in between. Because again, you're kind of out of the way a little bit, but you're not out at the very, very edge.
No, I agree in saying that somewhere sort of where the peninsula meets the actual mainland continent for sure. And it's sort of the same with over here as well. I do want to have some
central
that really
ones,
are just central. But I do agree that I think that having one... let's put them over here instead.
Okay.
In the center of this one here.
Yeah, totally.
I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on how many cities there needs to be. I don't want there to be a lot, because this is going to be heavily nomadic inspired. But
Well, even when you say cities, I don't even picture a city.
Not really.
I picture maybe a big town, maybe on some of them,
Yeah.
and even a few of them are probably just going to have like, they're going to be small, but they're going to have like the wooden fences all the way around, and that's the whole advantage. Welcome, you know.
let's have one be a little bit more of an outlier in the fact that they actually do lean maybe a little bit more heavily on fishing and stuff like that. And they can have their own reason as for why that we work out later. Let's put one guy there, one down here, and then let's put some on the inland. And
I think one is close to the center, like pretty close to the center, so probably a little off to the side, because it's not like they took a map and they're like, that's the bullseye.
Yeah.
But I think one that's in the center
100%,
is going to be important. It might be in a decent amount of danger, but it's also just too much of an advantage to have a central location.
Yeah,
you know?
being that these are wide open plains or almost like rolling prairies even, is that you do at least have a very long sight line.
Yeah.
So at the very least you can see these coming. And also being in the center of this too, with like how many people are sort of wandering around as these patrols, is that they'll always know when you're safe and when you're not. You'll always know when and where they're coming from, and all of these patrols will be kind of constantly passing you, being that you're in the center. They're gonna go past as well. So you paradoxically are the most in danger, but then also the most safe as well. But I do want to have some focus on being, because we have the forest set up here.
Yes.
As well as
The
rivers.
river. Yeah.
And I think sort of the combination of the two would make for a nice little spot. So let's put one of them... Actually, let's make one of them protected by the river instead of being on the other end of the river.
That little lip of the river, I think, does actually... It does seem kind of interesting, so that's probably a cool idea.
And let's put one more, maybe let's call it right about there.
Okay.
In the center there also, but a little bit closer to flexible boundary of where this nation and Fieros meet. Not perfectly centered, but out right in the middle of it, kind of close to sort of a little bit of everything.
I feel like we should have one by the border.
Okay.
More on the fact that it just like... That's kind of the place that sets the precedent for where the border is. You know what I mean? Because otherwise there's not a lot of significant landmarks. And we were thinking that like this isn't a super enforced border by any means, but it gives it a reason to have stopped there. As well as the fact that it's like, well, people coming in and going out, like they have some place to kind of stop immediately rather than just walking out out into open country. Like its purpose is pretty well to be a checkpoint, but that's what it's there for, and I feel like it has a use there. So putting something along the border, I think, is maybe going to be important.
So looking at landmarks that are nearby this, we have also this forest that comes up, and then we have this river as well that comes in and down and around.
I feel like putting it by the river is going to be more important. Like the fresh water is going to be more important. I was thinking kind of maybe putting it close to where the tri-section is. But honestly, like I think the we have fresh water and a river to follow is more of an important, especially because a lot of people, if you're going here, the road follows this. Like it's going to follow the river, and so I think that's going to be an important factor.
If you are a stone's throw away from water, other than the fact that these people are going to have like religious, cultural reasons why they've settled here, but if you're that close to a river, you're probably gonna settle on a river instead of being 21 minutes away from it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
You're probably gonna move over a little bit. So we'll toss them down by the river over there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll worry about names for those later, but I just wanted to have an idea of where these things were at.
Well, something I kind of thought of for at least for the center one, is okay, like prairie cultures, at least in Canada, like something that's super famous is the Inukshuk, or like a lot of stuff is built around what little landmarks there are. And I know there is an area that's in BC that's not in there, but it's just a big ass rock.
Yeah.
So what if this center one, like one of the reasons it was just kind of chosen in that spot is there's this just gigantic boulder that you can see for miles, and we can call it Big Rock.
For sure. Sounds good.
We don't have to, but that was just like the working name, obviously, just because it's easy.
I mean, we can take Big Rock and translate that into another language as well, and then work backwards again from there. Yeah,
but I do like the idea of there being the reason it's sort of the central one is like you can see it for a long distance all the way around, and so it's you don't get lost. You can find your way back here. So Big Rock just for now. We can draw it out later. That's the only one that really stuck out to me, but it would make sense to me if like this main central place, the reason it's such a, especially because there's no necessary water source anywhere nearby, what sticks out to me is you can find it. among the fields of grass, you can find it. And so that's what sort of stuck out to me as kind of important. But I do like the locations, just for where to put these sort of towns and cities.
One thing that we will have to sort of have an idea for eventually is if we're not going to put other like streams or creeks or rivers or anything like that, we do have to think of how they get their fresh water. It's easy enough to do a well as well, but it's something that gives you sort of an opportunity to make something unique, is how do they get their fresh water. There's a lot of different ways that different people have in history gotten their fresh water, and that are a lot more interesting and unique than having a well. So it's something to consider as well, that we can come up with a way that they get their fresh water and that they don't have to rely on a stream or a creek or
we might be able to come up with that. Although, creeks are also something, it's not going to be on the world map. We don't need to draw them out, but they could very well have them easily enough. So that totally works out that way. Now, the other thing we wanted to do was work out a little bit more in this sort of area. So we have the lantern moose, we have the stilt spider, and we have the toad. The
mosquitoes.
Yeah, I've been impaled mosquitoes.
Everywhere.
Which obviously they'd be around a bog. But this whole place is going to be swampy enough. But the name that popped into my head as I was drifting off to sleep one weary night was the Gosgire toad. Just popped into my head.
Where did you get that from?
The ether.
Okay.
It popped into my brain.
Bluetooth.
Yeah. And so I do like the idea of him being sort of the main owner of the Grand Bog in a way, and so we can kind of set his territory up to be that area, and maybe not really that far from it.
I like the idea that it pretty much, for the most part, chills in the water, and like, you know, a passerby could be like, "Oh, I didn't realize there was an island in the middle of the bog here," and then just yeah,
no kidding.
The eyes just like.
Yeah, exactly. And I want him to be very, very intimidating looking as well. Like maybe you'll have like some spikes on him or something cool like that, but we can figure that out later.
Flames. Stripes. 2 down the center.
They make him faster.
Blue. Yeah. A spoiler.
Underglow. But yeah, so that's probably going to be obviously his sort of territory, and I think he's probably going to be effectively the biggest, unless we think of anything else. But yeah, I do want him to be absolutely huge and just like a big problem.
So I was considering, I've got two. Oh no, you know what? They're honestly all good. Where do you want to put the undead, like shambling horde that is being led by? Do we decide? Are we going for the like lantern moose idea?
Yeah, I like the idea. Okay. We'll come up with a name for it for sure. But I think it's definitely just too cool a visual to not.
'Cause I've got a handful of ideas here, and I want your opinion on it.
Okay.
Do we like the idea of having it be sort of occupying like this space over here that is in between the other nations, that mountain pass there, and then the bog, and that sort of kind of limits like who, if anybody, can really easily travel through there without taking that risk? Do we want to have it over here because there's a large area that I think that'd be a cool
it's tucked
little
away
spice.
A little bit?
Exactly, it's tucked away, it's a little spooky and it's out of the way. Or do we want to have it as being sort of on the border of
the Crescent Island?
The Crescent Island here that is going to be spookily, eerily, ominously silent.
Yeah.
Because that, as like a backdrop to that, is super cool. Like, oh no, I'm running away from zombies. And then you're like,
oh god, I have to go back.
Yeah.
The zombies are the better alternative. That is cool, although like the problem I have with that is like the curse of the zombies and the silent curse are going to be kind of going up against it. I can see why an animal would want to turn around. I can't see why an undead would want to turn around from a cursed area. You see what I mean?
That's a fair point.
I feel like they would wander in and not give a fucking shit.
That's a valid point.
They're like, wow, it's quiet here.
Yeah.
I love the visual of the running away from zombies and choosing to turn back, but it feels like it clashes a little bit too much. But these two are such a toss-up for me as
Yeah.
well. They're both, like, initially I thought over here because it's out of the way, and so, but also, yeah, the idea that it's like, oh, I gotta get into this country for whatever reason, but I have to get through the hordes of undead before I can get to anything else.
I have an opinion. I've formed an
Okay.
opinion in the meantime.
Okay.
What if the shambling hordes of the undead are tucked away almost in this back corner instead? And the thing now that is sort of gatekeeping the passageway between the this nation and the swampy lands is the big ol' spider. And you may have to contend with all manner of sticky webby barricades on your travel there.
Fair enough, yeah. Well, we did want to come up with a few extra ones as well, so we might want to
That's true.
make smaller amounts of territory. Although, yeah, this is a forest, and I
Yeah.
think the forest is
And
going to kind of continue into here,
The
and so
reason
having
why that one stood out to me as being maybe a better option is because if you do have a little bit of... Pretty much the only place in this section that really screams as like, oh, this is your way out. This is like where like through traffic might actually go. And so that is kind of the perfect place for a spider's web, spider's nest, is to trap
is the
things like that that are
singular
trying to-
entrance. That's
yeah,
a good point. That seems like where it would set
a
up.
little bit thematically.
Yeah, definitely. And well, because this is also kind of the thing is I'm like, well, why wouldn't people take the semi-shire entrance there? Because it's worse.
Yeah. Although I do think that should be specifically and canonically a essentially impossible route, like maybe it's a mega cliff or something like that. Because we
I
can't
agree.
have the nice peaceful, hey, we're just doing our little thing Shire zone.
Right next to
and
the
then,
undead
like,
fuck zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree, and that was sort of the purpose of these mountains in the first place. It's like you can get there, but like it's near impossible. Like they are protected
Yeah.
by geography
Yeah.
and the gods in a way. Like just
Yeah.
there's no way in.
Where can I build my Legos, Dad? Anywhere the sun touches. What about where the shadows are? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think there's no way even for like the strange undead curse to make its way through there, and so that was another thing I kind of was thinking of at the same time. So we can make sort of this area the undead moose sort of territory, definitely. And yeah, spider.
We can even like say, may I?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sort of like this route is going to be the way that you want to go to escape. We don't necessarily need to have this entire zone be, oh, that's spider zone. It can take up this little nook.
That's actually what I was gonna say. Yeah, is that the area in between the mountains there is probably going to be best
Yeah,
for
so it'll
the
take up-
spider, and it's even sort of a cramped zone in between,
Exactly.
even geographically in between the mountains, which are like this high area where you might have just webs and stuff like that. And it is going to be a more forested area of the entire swamp, so it would make a lot more sense that way, definitely.
It feels like the attic of the swamp.
Yeah, really.
And or the basement. Same thing.
Yeah. And so we got the toad there. So those are our kind of main three. Now we need some more.
Now we need more. So what animals go in a swamp? We got crocodiles / alligators.
Yes, absolutely.
Lobsters.
You've been playing too much Elden Ring.
I am what I am.
I really don't think lobsters actually live in the swamp.
Snails.
Okay, the slug actually.
It's not irredeemable.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, frick, gosh, this is an obscure reference, no one's gonna know, but Deltora Quest.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, I love those bugs.
Yeah,
What?
like, I'm not sure exactly how popular they were. They may have just been popular in our local area.
Yeah.
I know there was an anime made about
Straight out
that
of the
fucking set of
Scholastic
books.
Book Fair.
Yeah.
Well, you know the green screen is now going to be flooded with it.
Yeah, I read the shit out of those books, and
Yeah.
one of the main gem bearing or gem protecting enemies was this giant slug.
Yeah.
And
It was spooky.
it was
cool.
I remember
Yeah.
reading it and being like, this sounds like a bad time.
Yeah.
So slug is not out of the
Yeah.
Oh, that could even be a cool idea too, because like I think the least wet area is going to be where the spider is.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe not. Like it's going to be the least, I think, because the
Yeah.
stilt spider is still meant to like walk through the water.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the idea. But what sort of pops out to me with the slug is like the idea that like a lot of the water has been turned to like this sticky sludge by the slug, and so because I was like, well, the least intimidating thing about a slug is that they're slow.
Yeah.
But what if it makes you slow too? And so the idea that maybe it's sort of adapted the swamp to it, and so trying to traverse its territory is incredibly dangerous because you're more likely to even be stuck in the muck than a regular swamp. Like the water itself is sticky and kind of corrosive. So that could be an interesting idea as well. Like it's actually
muck.
It's actually changed the area around it a little bit to fit its advantage.
But we don't have to necessarily nail down slug yet either. There's a lot of things that live in spooky dark areas.
I do like the idea.
Bats.
Bats are, but a big bat though. I feel like I want to keep that for something else. Probably a mountainous area. I think that could be cool.
Yeah. Alligator, crocodile.
Crocodile like screams so much. It's such a staple of that sort of place. But what could make it more than a crocodile though?
More legs.
Oh my god, what if it's super long? Like
so it's a snake with legs and a mouth.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, no kidding.
How many legs? Centipede legs. Oh shit. Centipedes.
Fair enough. The centipede crocodile.
Yeah.
But it still have a long tongue.
I don't know why. The fucking cat bus from Studio Ghibli, but a crocodile popped into my head. Just like, oh, welcome aboard.
It's stationary, and in order to get past, you have to push down its teeth.
Yeah.
But one of them is gonna chomp it down on your finger.
You know, sounds like a game I'd love to play.
Scared the shit out of me as a child.
The centipede actually is a pretty good idea as well.
Right?
The crocodile is so... It almost might be too stereotypical.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. I think that's a fine idea for creatures or even smaller ones of these beasts, but I don't know necessarily if it has to be so significant that it takes up an entire portion of its land to itself.
Yeah, totally. There might be just an area that is full of crocodiles for sure, but yeah, just I can't think of anything that makes a crocodile any cooler than it already is. Like,
but like a ginormous 250 foot, actually longer than that, centipede or millipede or whatever that is curled up and then unfurls all of its legs. That's a spooky visual. I like the idea of a centipede millipede.
For some reason, what sticks into my brain, and I don't know how I'd make this work, but the idea of like, wow, look at this singular long dry path, and you follow it to the fucking mouth of the centipede, and it finds you there. Or I was even thinking, I was like, what if it is actually just the one helpful thing around here? Doesn't actually eat people.
It's all right.
Yeah, it just you can walk on it. It's fine. But I don't know. It definitely is an interesting idea. But yeah, like what can we do to make it like it's gonna be big, but like how could it be like kind of magical or unique? It's hard to make something with like 100 billion fucking legs more unique.
That's fair.
It's
that's
like
fair.
what do you change about it that makes it something more than what it is?
Well, okay, another thing to consider too is you do want there to be at least some level of population here. Do they have areas down here where it's more or less okay?
Maybe somewhere in between this area is someplace that it's not dangerous, but it's also not the territory of a titanic evil being. And so that is considered to be the safe area, even though the mortality rate's still 50%. I feel like we should probably stick it kind of closer to the mountains.
Okay.
Like probably somewhere like just a small little area around here. Something like that.
That space is just okay.
Ish.
More or less.
And yeah, so maybe the pathway through this place kind of follows the mountain pass, and then something over here. Something over here is going to be sketchy and not fun. On a little list of swamp animals here, there's a swan.
Okay. A swan's an interesting idea.
Well, because it's actually kind of elegant and not ugly.
Yeah.
And so maybe it...
So what if this thing is not necessarily dangerous for the fact that it's enormous and spooky? What if there's something else? It could also be an effect that it has on people.
I think some sort of effect would be interesting. Because again, like a swan kind of has that effect where it's just kind of elegant. And you like to watch it. Maybe
it could be kind of like almost mermaidy, where
it leads you to
brings
danger.
people in, exactly.
Yeah.
There's maybe the swan isn't even necessarily the only portion of it. Maybe sort of like an anglerfish, the swan is a portion of this bigger thing, and you think like, just
my
walk
God.
through the bog to get to it, right? And then like the whole that sort of deal.
No, totally. The like the swan like head and like little set of wings is just its nose.
Yeah.
And there's like something else that's gonna fucking. It's the crocodile. It's like putting a duck on the tip of your car where your hood ornament, just putting the duck on where the hood ornament is on your car, but it's a swan on the tip of a crocodile.
I don't know why I'm picturing the crocodile from Peter Pan.
Yeah, totally. But no, I do like the idea that the swan, is like something that kind of like draws you in. I'm not sure if it was something that would, I don't think it draws you towards something else that will eat you, because that just seems counterintuitive unless it's like some sort of strange symbiotic relationship it has with something else. But what would the other thing have to give it back?
Maybe you just walk into some swampy water and it dissolves you and it absorbs the nutrients that way.
Fair enough.
It's a very exposed stomach.
Or it leads you to a area with a whole bunch of smaller swans, but they're carnivorous.
There's also, this is something that we could say, like, we don't designate it to a specific zone, and maybe this is the peaceful thing that you were kind of looking for, and the swan is something that you can actually follow, and it'll more or less show you a safer route through the swamp.
Actually, it could be the one thing that lives around the Curse of Silence area, or at least like along the edge. That's sort of an idea as well. Just like this elegant beast that sort of skims around skims around the edge, or even swims its way in the bay, or something like that. Maybe we could have it so that it just kind of I think I like your idea more, where it you have a small chance, but there is one thing that might actually help you through this area. So like just sort of a beast that is the one thing not trying to eat you here. The one, but it wouldn't have a specific area at that point. Maybe it just kind of leads you away from danger sometimes. So we'll leave that without any sort of specific marking. One thing, now we might want to just layer this onto the moose, but like the idea of the wisp is something that's inherently tied to bogs and swamps and stuff like that. Is there an animal we might want to associate with that in a way? Actually, that could be the centipede. That would follow a little bit of the same, like, it's follow this nice safe pathway, and the wisps are there leading you right to right to your doom, which is at the end of the pathway.
I don't know if I'm set on the idea of it being a like more stationary thing. I love the visual of like you've got all this thick wooded area, and then there's this indescribably long, scuttling, clicking, scary ass giant centipede, like weaving its way uncannily, elegantly, or nimbly at least through the trees or whatever, right? And it can like climb over everything and being scary in that aspect, rather than being like something that is
leading you in.
Yeah.
That could be an interesting idea. I mean, it kind of could be, depending on how long it is, it kind of could be both. It tries to lead you into the center of its sort of territory, but it's so long that like by the time you start to run away, like it's there. No matter how far you run away, you're close to it. And it, like you were saying, it might like kind of coil. And so it's like if it leads you to the center and then you try and want to run away, one of its legs is going to grab you. Even if you get over the second layer of it, somehow it's going to grab you. So it could just be ferocious. It could just be sort of it might not have to have this crazy gimmick to it. I'd like to make it like more visually interesting, but we can obviously get there. But the idea that I do want to make it slightly better. I don't know, what do you think would make this thing a little bit different than...
Well, I like the idea of it being, because like, compared to their size, compared to us, these things are really fast. I mean, compared to, like, smaller things, they're quick. They chase, they crunch. They're a genuinely scary insect if you are the size of the thing that it wants to eat.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of it, like, being able to be very mobile. It's very large, and yet it can also, like, nimbly go between the trees, over things like that, like being very, very mobile. But you had mentioned that you like the idea of it being able to also lay ambushes. And if you want to have it be able to lay ambushes, we should put it in as close to, I think, the marshiest spot of this big ol' marsh.
Okay.
Being closer to the toad.
Yeah, totally.
So if you're going to have something that can, like, say, lay partially submerged or something like that, this is probably going to be, like, radiating out from that toad zone. Is going to be, like, closer to the grand bog that this toad lives in.
Yeah, totally.
So if we can give it a section of the area there in between where
the grand bog and sort of the safe zone-ish.
Yeah. As far as, like, visual spice, what would you do to spice that fella up a little bit?
Well, I know we have sort of a bit of an undead motif, but I think one thing that really does creep people out is the idea of, like, the uncanny valley a little bit, and sort of like things that seem human at first and then get weirder. And so the idea that, like, I don't know, it's got, like, limbs that kind of look human or something like that, or even kind of maybe a human face or something like that would be really, really creepy.
So like, it's like, it's still gonna have its, like, thousands of gross, creepy, spiky bug legs, but then also, like, additionally have like, humanoid.
Yeah, you think so? It would be cool if, like, basically you just have, like, what look like human hands just at a glance, like, sticking out from, like, the space in between. It's like it's shells and stuff like that. And so like, what you can kind of picture with that is, like, if you're walking through the bog and you just see, like, sort of limbs sticking up, like, that's creepy enough already. But then as you get deep enough into the bog, they kind of start to move and they even start to grab at you.
So they are functional then. It's not like, you know, these are like the spikes of its shell or something that are, like, they're aesthetically only these are functional bits of it sticking out that are, like, human
I think so,
arms.
And that would be creepy. And we could even play with the idea. I think it's kind of I think you see it in a few things of media, but just like the long centipede with the human face, which is creepy as hell. We might play with that, I don't know, but I do like the idea of there having, like, maybe even if it starts to, like, grow like the appendages of, like, things it eats, and so maybe it's not even just human. Like, you have, like, a horse leg sticking out somewhere or something like that would be also creepy. And again, they don't look exactly like it because they're growing from the beast itself, but it like just naturally develops these sorts of semi-limbs that are made to basically, like, attract and just creep out whatever it's ambushing as well. And so that would make it visually distinct, which would be cool.
Okay.
One more animal that actually popped into my head would be, like, a pig or a boar.
Totally.
Would be something that would be easy to work with. Basically just making, like, a dire boar or something like that. And I honestly picture that probably being the closest to the safe zone.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a video of a boar chasing something and then that thing turns around and decides to face the boar and the boar turns around? Like, there might be ways that the people figure out how to deal with it. I think having, like, some sort of swamp pig or something like that, or maybe that could even just be an animal that's common, or, like, straight up just, like, dire boars, but maybe they are just an animal. We could just do that. Yeah. We have a little bit of, like, sort of territory set out and something that differentiates the swamp area from just being swamp.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the creatures are very, very important. Oh yeah, we had the slug. Did we want to put that down?
Yeah, I don't know if I love that so much that I want that to be, like, one of the, like, centerpiece things, because we can have a million different disgusting, nasty little creatures in this area, but I don't know.
Are they going to be
if
big?
That jumped out at me so much that I want to make it like a, you know, a title card.
Yeah, fair enough.
Beast.
I mean, there's also the idea we could do like a plant.
And
And the thing that really sticks out for swamps, for me at least, is just mushrooms.
Yeah, the fungus for sure.
So yeah, we could have a giant mushroom
colony.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because that's the thing, is like mushrooms, a lot of the time, like what you see is kind of like grass. Like what you see isn't individual mushrooms, it's one gigantic mushroom.
Yeah, the mushroom iceberg.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so yeah, we can put that. I think that it'll probably have like a main area, but I think it'll permeate its way out through.
I think that's an interesting one, because I don't know if like this is just like a natural creation, or if you want it to be more of the like the sort of like magical beast type thing. But that has like definitely a lot of ways that it could kind of interact with the other things specifically, and that is, some of them maybe this is beneficial for, some of them maybe this is absolutely hazardous to their own health, but a lot of reasons why it can interact with and not spread out beyond a certain area. So it can kind of fill in the gaps in between the other things we have laid out specific areas for.
Yeah.
Because if you have it over in the far corner there, maybe that's why the this wandering, shambling undead horde doesn't continue any further, because it goes too far, and then now all of a sudden this is something that this
really trims its population.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's sort of a barrier, like the undead can't quite penetrate their way through, because they're probably like weak to the idea of it. Like the spores will infect them.
Oh yeah, they're already so decomposed. Like, yeah,
exactly. So they can't break past. Yeah, that'll probably be good for the main area of this sort of gigantic mushroom infection.
But then also, it does say, like, you know, maybe like some of the other creatures in this area are also able to actually eat it, and so it's not actually hazardous for them, it's hazardous for the fungus. So like, for instance, like the toad and stuff like that, or even like other just creatures of the swamp in general maybe, and some of them could possibly get like infected by it, but then other ones are able to actually eat it, and so kind of keep it also in its own zone. Yeah,
totally. And I think that would be interesting for an adventurer to like see that as a hazard. Like, yeah, people can eat this thing, but and so yeah, walking through, they have to try and like kind of avoid these sort of mushroom colony areas at risk of being infected by it. Yeah, in like D&D terms, I could see how like, yeah, if you do manage to get infected by this mushroom somehow, maybe you automatically fail a death saving throw if you go down or something like that, or just little things that make it so it is a hazard in a sort of way.
Did you ever see or play The Last of Us?
No, I didn't.
Okay, that's their big thing, is there's like these like fungal spores that I think it was basically due to like global warming evolved to be able to survive at the internal temperature of humans. And so like it sort of slowly, like, you know, if ingested or if like brought into the bloodstream or whatever, it will slowly kind of grow inside of you until it eventually takes over your brain. Like you've probably heard of it's the same, what was it?
I've heard of the clicker.
Yeah, well, exactly. There is a real life actual fungus.
Oh yeah, the one that takes over ants
and stuff.
Yeah, that one's creepy as fuck. Yeah.
But then it evolves.
That was actually used for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it is in the show as well.
It's a real thing.
Because in real world, it can't survive at the internal temperature of a human, but it can at insects level. But because of global warming, it evolved to be able to survive at that temperature. And then it like eventually takes over like their brain and uses that to forward the agenda of the like the colony.
Interesting.
And so it can kind of be a similar thing where it does actually survive, taking over creatures.
I don't think it would zombify you. It would probably just kill you. But taking it the distance is...
Yeah, that's exactly the benefit to it. I don't necessarily want to have these be mushroom zombies. We already have our own kind of zombies, sort of thing, and that has been done. We will leave their intellectual property alone.
But yeah, it's like kind of like birds with bears.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be infected by it, and then keep slugging it out and trying to survive, and then eventually it's too much and they collapse where they are and they die, and then all of a sudden it uses your body as fuel to sort of create
cultivate
new mushrooms and expand the colony that way.
Totally. Yeah. But yeah, I love the idea that that's one of these sort of gargantuan creatures, because I mean I think mushrooms are actually closer to animals than they are to plants.
Spooky.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
They're closer to being humans than monkeys are. Makes you think.
Yeah. But yeah, so the idea of it sort of being one of these leviathans or titans or something like that, but just functions differently. Is very cool, and it's permeated throughout the swamp.
Well, it's also
it's a totally new type of threat.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. It's very unique in the way that like it has its own agenda and goals and stuff, but it is so different than.
It's so hard to stop.
Yeah, I know.
Like you can't just kill it.
Yeah, like a big old spider wants to probably just eat you. This thing wants to live inside of your body and then let you die a slow life so that it can use your body as fuel to,
it's so much creepier. I love that idea. Yeah, I think that pretty well covers a decent amount of...
a lot of fuel for our spooky swamp here as well.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, you can make some really, really cool aesthetic stuff with this.
Yeah, 100%. So we filled in some area here. We filled in some more portions of the map with not only people, places, and things, but ideas, enemies, scary, spooky things. We've honestly almost filled in
this map,
pretty much that continent there. Yeah, we've still got a couple little areas. We've got the like the elfy forest over here to do a little bit more work on, and we've got the nice peaceful little nation there that we've temporarily called the Shire,
the semi-Shire,
we still have
the Shire-ish
thresh out a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with names and a few more things and get into the details. But it's looking to be a more filled out map, and I think there's something everywhere.
Yeah,
there's something in places.
Yeah,
we'll want to come up with, I think, places that make the sort of prairie land. Like we'll want to come up with what makes the towns unique on that. But yeah, we're getting pretty close there.
Yeah. And then I think that we might not have time for it in the next episode, but we fill in those places, and then we should probably work on doing a little bit of previous interactions between these things to give them a little bit of the history, why they take the shape that they have today. But I think that we've made an episode. I think we're done. We're done for today.
Well, thanks for tuning in, folks. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. See if you can leave a comment, so you might be featured in the intermission and
put you up on the big screen for the next one.
Well, thank you so much. Bye. See ya.